Hello and welcome to the Joe Mag Show. I'm Joe Maggs, editor-in-chief of the High Screen. Today, Zach, Tennen, and I are talking about the Southeast Division, the new-look Miami Heat, the Atlanta Hawks after a disastrous summer, and why the Washington Wizards, Charlotte Hornets, and Orlando Magic make the Southeast the most exciting League Pass division in the NBA. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome to the Joe Mag Show. I'm Joe Maggs, editor-in-chief of the High Screen. With me is Zach Tennen, our NBA writer. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing well this morning. How about you?
Doing good. So as you guys know, as if you've been following along, we've been previewing all 6 divisions in the NBA. Today, we're doing the division that LeBron James left behind. We're talking about the Southeast, Miami Heat, Washington Wizards, Charlotte Hornets, now the Hornets, not the Bobcats. Then you also got the Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks. I think the obvious first question to start off with, Zach, is with the Miami Heat, right? They're a much, much different franchise now without LeBron James, but they still have 2 Hall of Fame talents in Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. They brought in some interesting vets. They brought in Danny Granger. They brought in Josh McRoberts. They brought in Luol Deng. And so this is a team that is really polarizing. A lot of people have them as a lock to make the playoffs. A lot of people think that they're going to be abominable. Where do you stand on the Miami Heat right now?
Well, first of all, Dwayne Wade needs to be healthy. Because if Dwayne Wade is not healthy, let's say he misses 30 games, the Heat are maybe even a borderline playoff team. With with the teams in this division, Atlanta, Washington, and Charlotte, and D Wade not at his full health, the Heat are not guaranteed to be better than those teams. So that's my first point. Dwayne Wade needs to be healthy.
Well, and Zach, to that point, what was interesting is last year Wade only played in 54 games, but it was a strategy, right? They would sit him on every back-to-back so that he'd be fresh for the playoffs. Obviously, that backfired to a certain extent because Wade really didn't show up in the finals. Is it possible that he can play a full season at this point?
I'm going to say as close to, nothing's impossible, but I'm going to say there's a very good chance that he does not play a full season. I mean, the last couple seasons he's played 54 games, 69 games, 49 games in the lockout season. The 3 years previous to that he was pretty good, but he's going to be turning 33 years old this year.
Right, he has a lot of miles on those legs. So I don't know. I think you're totally on the money. If Dwayne Wade isn't playing at a near all-star level, I think you already have to talk about Miami. You know, at best they're a low playoff seed. Now, I guess the guy that we really should focus on though is Chris Bosh, who's obviously their best player at this point. He's a really special player, and I think Chris Bosh is going to be a 23 points per game kind of guy. He's going to grab a bunch of rebounds. He's going to play really decent defense. How do you like the addition of Luol Deng in at small forward, McRoberts at forward? Do you think these are guys that complement a Chris Bosh-led team?
Well, you weren't going to get a better replacement than Luol Deng. They went out right away and got him after they lost LeBron. The management did a great job doing that to at least keep Miami fans. I mean, obviously you're pretty upset when you lose one of the best players of all time, but Luol Deng is he's a 2-time All-Star, I think. He's been a very solid player for his whole career, and he's one of the best all-around players in the league, as well as perimeter defenders. But the point you made about Chris Bosh, yeah, I think a lot of people are taking him for granted because of how he played around LeBron. He was more of a spot-up jump shooter. But I think we'll see a transition from him more towards his Toronto days where he demands the ball more and where he makes one-on-one plays more instead of just kind of stands out in the three-point line waiting for LeBron to dish him out a pass.
So I think Miami's in the playoffs, probably a 5 or 6 seed. I could see them being a 7 or 8 too, but I think they have enough to be a decent East team. and I don't think they're going to win a playoff series, but I think they're in. What about you?
I think they will be 5 or 6. Five. I think they could be honestly as good as 4 if healthy, but I think 5 or 6 would be the most accurate projection for Miami. Our next topic here is Atlanta Hawks. During the summer, we kind of got alerted that the former owner Bruce Levinson, there was some controversy there with some comments he made about what percentage, what race is in the stadium. That wasn't obviously it wasn't as big a scenario as Donald Sterling, but I mean it obviously caused corruption within the organization. So what do you think? The Hawks were a talented team until Al Horford got hurt last year. How do you think that ownership situation affects them?
Right, we got the Bruce Levinson situation. Then you also have the comments that Danny Ferry made about Luol Deng that leaked out. A lot of turmoil. I think there is a lot to say about the fact that players have all the power right now as far as the movement of this league. And Atlanta was already a franchise that struggled to get premier players to begin with. And now all of a sudden you have this incentive. If Danny Ferry keeps his job, no matter who takes over ownership of the team, there's going to be a feeling that players aren't going to want to go to that situation. And I know a lot of former players and even some current players and GMs have come out to defend Danny Ferry. And I don't think Danny Ferry's a racist, but it was pretty careless what he said. And I think it is going to have a long-term effect. In the short term, and I wrote about this for the High Screen a couple weeks ago, the Atlanta Hawks are a good basketball team. They were the number 3 seed in the East before Horford went down. And after his injury, they found a way to piece together some decent basketball. They sneak into the East at the number 8 spot in the playoffs. In what was a really weird finish to the year with the Knicks and the Cavs, it almost looked like they were trying to miss the playoffs. And the Hawks gave the Pacers all that they could handle in the first round. I think this is a good team. I think Paul Millsap as a number 2 scorer is a really good player, and I think he and Horford, we're just scratching the surface as far as how good they're going to be together. I think they're a great combination. Kyle Korver is a stud, probably the best shooting specialist, stationary shooter in basketball. And T gets the job done. They got guys like Damari Carroll. I think this is a fun team that's going to do very well in the East. I think they're going to be competing for a middle seed right there with Miami.
Yeah, I would agree. The East is wide open. Teams like them in Miami could be anywhere from 4 to 8, depending on what happens. But also, I'd like to note Atlanta has the second longest active playoff streak, 7 seasons from 2008 to 2014, behind the Spurs, who have 17. So Atlanta is a solid organization, like you said, and they don't really get that much appreciation around the country. But like you said, Al Horford was Al Horford's a great player. He's one of the best big men in this league. He's a great mid-range jump shooter. He's a decent defender. He has a very high IQ on offense. He's a great rebounder. And he and Millsap, I think that was a great strategy putting them together because they work really well together. The floor spacing, Millsap makes it work out. And Kyle Korver, very efficient in that lineup. DeMar Carroll, one of the most underrated players in basketball. So they're a hardworking team, and they're deep, too. They have John Jenkins, Mike Scott, some guys who can shoot the ball there. So the ownership situation was tough, but I think first and foremost, they're going to be playing basketball.
Yeah, I think and they're a good basketball team. Mike Budenholzer is a really fun young coach going into his second year. I'm really excited to see what changes and what evolution they have. They're going to be good. I think the other subplot for them, though, is there's no shortage of trade rumors, and that was a big part of the offseason. They have so many assets. They have a lot of cap space. They're the type of team that could make a big trade for their team or a big trade against their team to take a step back and to reposition themselves. It's going to be interesting at the trade deadline where Atlanta is in the standings because a lot of teams would love to have Al Horford. and I think they would be fielding a lot of decent offers. So it will be interesting to see. They've said it time and time again that they want to build around Horford. I think they should, but if they're low in the standings, some team like, I don't know, the Golden State Warriors or uh, yeah, you could name half a dozen teams. Somebody would take Al Horford and make a pretty good offer.
Right. And this, I would keep Al Horford too because this team is already deep built around him. I haven't even mentioned Pero Antic, who was kind of a surprise last year, shooting the ball outside. Kent Bazemore they signed. Thabo Cephalosha they
Right.
signed, and Adrian Payne they drafted, and Shelvin Mack is a very good backup point guard. So this is a really deep team.
Zach, let's move on to. In my opinion, I think Charlotte's the most interesting team, but I think Washington has the most excitement around them. They add Paul Pierce in the offseason. They're a team built around two guards and John Wall and Bradley Beal. Now, Beal's going to miss the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season with the wrist injury. But when you combine those guys with Nene and Marcin Gortat, this is a team that, they struggled in round two against the Pacers, but they made it to round two. And whenever you have a young nucleus that's starting to advance in the playoffs, it's exciting. You're a Wizards guy. What's the feel right now? Do you think the Wizards have it in them to make a bigger run this year?
Well, first of all, I'm extremely excited for the season for the Wizards. I'm going to be trying to watch every game. The Wizards have it in them, definitely. They have a lot of their coach. They have a good coach who could have easily been fired in the last 2 years with their poor starts, but they got it together. John Wall has really grown up as a leader. You mentioned that backcourt is one of the best backcourts. It's unfortunate that Beal is going to be out. They have a couple other injuries, but they retooled this offseason. And a few years ago we were talking about Washington, such a young, immature team. Now, outside of Beal, Wall, and Porter, they're pretty old and experienced. They have Nene, they have Marcin Gortat, and Paul Pierce. So I think Washington has it in them, and I think health is obviously a key for any team. But at the beginning of the season, having Brad Beal out, hopefully he's going to make a speedy recovery.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in the Atlantic preview. I really like Toronto. I think they're my favorite to get the 3 seed. But if Cleveland and Chicago are the runaway top 2 teams, I think Washington is right up there with Toronto as a team that's going to give them a run for their money. And I think a potential Final Four in the East where it's Cleveland against, let's say it's Cleveland, Washington, Chicago versus Toronto. I think any combination of those 4 teams should be really exciting. I love that Pierce went there. I was so surprised. I could tell you exactly where I was, actually. I had just woken up at a friend's house. There was a big summer party. It was a Saturday. And I checked my phone in the morning, I'm yawning, and I see Paul Pierce went to the Wizards. And I'm like, what the heck? I mean, you're thinking, is he going to retire? Is he going to stay with Brooklyn? And he goes to Washington. I think it's a great fit. I know that they're trying to get Otto Porter along. He didn't play much as a rookie. But I think in the meantime, having Pierce there, you got Martell Webster as a shooter to come off the bench. I think there's plenty of depth to make sure Pierce's minutes stay relatively low. I think he's going to be huge for them in the fourth quarter. I think there's something about him and Wall playing together. That's I don't know. That's a really tough combo.
Mm-hmm. Both tough-minded players. And let's also not forget, I think Washington's success mostly started with their defense last year. Its defense last year. They were 6th in efficiency, and in fourth quarter points per game per opponent, they were 4th. But also they basically swapped Trevor Ariza, who's a really good perimeter defender, for Paul Pierce, who's obviously older and slower. So Otto Porter is going to have to step in and be a very serviceable perimeter defender to keep Washington at that high level of defense, which they will need to compete with Miami, Chicago, and Toronto. Let's go to the last topic here, the Charlotte Hornets, who you and I especially are looking forward to seeing with the addition of Lance Stevenson. Last year, Al Jefferson was basically an unstoppable scorer. Kemba Walker is a nice, confident point guard, good shooter. So this team seems to be fitting well together. They made some additions. What do you think about Charlotte going forward?
I think, first of all, I love that they're the Hornets. I was never a really big fan of the Bobcats nickname. I think it's way better to have the Charlotte Hornets back in the NBA. Love the purple unis. I really, really like the Lance Stevenson signing, and Zach Lowe kind of predicted it like months before it happened. He said that Charlotte would be a team that could go after him. And I had a feeling that Lance was going to leave Indy. I just didn't like the feel of how the Pacers season ended. And obviously, this is way before the Paul George injury. I just thought Lance was going to go take a bigger role on another team. I think he knows he's ready. He's a young guy. He wants to prove his worth in the league as a starter. And I think combining him and Kemba, two New York City guys, really, if you talk about tough-minded players, they're not afraid of anybody. You put that backcourt with Big Al, and I know they don't have a ton of shooting, but I just like this team. I think Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball, and that nucleus, I know Al Jefferson's not known for his defense, but MKG and Lance on the perimeter that's a really, really formidable wing defense. They lose Josh McRoberts, but they have Noah Vonleh and Cody Zeller to platoon at power forward, two really young, talented guys. I'm really high on this team. I think that Washington's better right now. I think Toronto's better right now. But I wouldn't be shocked if Charlotte found a way into that mix just because of how talented they are.
Yeah, I totally agree. Charlotte's a dangerous team, not just this year, but I think it's really that the team's really set themselves up nicely for the next 3 years. Al Jefferson's 29; he's in his prime. They added some shooting. They weren't really great shooting last year. They added P.J. Hairston in the draft, Gary Neal, sharpshooter, and Marvin Williams, who can step out and shoot the three
right,
too.
Marvin Williams kind of takes over that Josh McRoberts role where he's that lengthy forward who can pass a little bit, rebound a little bit. That is a pretty sneaky signing.
And Charlotte was, talking about defense again, Charlotte was vicious on defense last year. They held their opponents to the third worst field goal percentage last year, and defensive efficiency, they were number 5. So this is a team that strives off hard work and running the offense around Al Jefferson. And Kemba does a nice job of getting his teammates the ball where they want the ball.
Yeah, I feel like Kemba Walker's kind of like Mike Conley of the East, where he's really underrated. You never hear him talked about as one of the best point guards in basketball, but he's a really good playmaker, very athletic, can score in bunches. And when you got him and you got Big Al, who you have to double team on the block, I think that makes up for some of their shooting problems. And as long as Kemba is improving as a three-point shooter, if Lance can improve as a three-point shooter, MKG apparently learned how to shoot this summer, which is important because the dude had the worst jump shot in basketball. If they can just be okay at jump shots, they get buckets at the rim. Big Al he commands a double team. I'm all about this Charlotte team, and Zach, I guess I just want to finish on this note. The Southeast is a really strong conference. I think that there's going to be 4 playoff teams from this division, and then you look at the Orlando Magic. They're the worst team, but they're also like a really fun team. They're really young, so that's probably why they're going to lose talent. Yeah, they're young. They're going to lose a lot of games because they're inexperienced. But when you got guys like Aaron Gordon, Victor Oladipo, Peyton that they just added at point guard, I just think that this team is going to be really fun to watch. So I think all 5 teams are really watchable. It's a great league pass division, and I'm excited.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm really going to be tuning into these games with my league pass. This is going to be a great, competitive, exciting division to watch.
Right. So probably not another NBA Finals trip from the Southeast, but it's going to be fun to watch. We're going to come back with the next one. We're going to start over in the West, and we're going to talk about the Northwest. Obviously, OKC's the cream of the crop there, but got some very interesting teams to fill that division. Thank you for tuning into the Joe Mag Show.